back leading this. I want to publicly thank Laura for covering for me last week. I know she's not here, but I do appreciate. I did tell Jill and Andrew, I gave them a public thank you a couple weeks ago, but I do appreciate all the help in running this series. So this morning we will start with, of course, my favorite thing, the homework. Anybody remember what we asked you guys to think about over the week? This is why I'm always going to help. So this was the discussion of awe. Do you guys remember what the A, the W, and the E stood for? What was the A?
Affection.
Affection. The W?
Warmth.
Yes, warmth. And then the E? Encouragement. Yep. So we asked you to kind of think about that and the lesson of discipline and grace. And reflect kind of what are you doing well with those? What are you struggling with those? The other thing was Laura spent time on those stages of parenting, and he kind of gave 5 of them, the C's. And the encouragement was to think about where you were at, what stage, and what's going well with that stage, and what's hard about that stage. Anybody reflect on that? Do anything now that I bring it up? Anything stick out for you guys? Thank you.
Okay, admitted, I don't remember the C's, but we had a good discussion of like where our kids fall in that and how we can like help them become like move on to the next stage to like with us. But then also like checking ourselves that they're going to make mistakes when we start to let them make their own decisions and such, and how we respond to that matters.
And I like Jill saying, so the 5 stages were the catering, you did it for them, controlling, coaching, consulting, and caring. And I like that Jill brings up, I think the biggest challenge as a parent, I'll always talk about that picture of the big men's shoes with a little kid feet in it, because it's a reference point for me that I'm not just raising a child, but also the adult he or she will become, to keep me focused kind of on that next stage. Because we can all get stuck in, well, this would be easier, this would be faster, they need my help, those kind of things. So thinking about that next stage. Anybody else? Just general thoughts or comments from last week or the previous week? Anything? We're 3 weeks in. Anything you guys are doing differently or thinking about?
I think I'm just more aware of the affection and the warmth. When they come in for a snuggle or a hug, like just how could we, like touch on their shoulder a little bit more, like how can we just give it even more affection? And I think we did it. I don't think we're changing anything different, but I'm more aware of those two. Encouragement is one that's hard for me, so I want to obviously encourage them to continue to do it on their own or try it on their own. Sometimes our kids are like, I can't do it, and then it becomes this meltdown of like they don't think they have the power or the will or the skill to do it, and so then I'm like, yes you can, and then it's like at that point it's not even worth it, and I'll just do it anyways. So I think for us,
they're all guilty of that.
Yeah, encouragement is the one that we need to work on, I think, a little bit more and continue to give them that power. But I think every hug, every snuggle, I've spent more time on that, like, oh, this is the affection, oh, this is the warmth.
And one thing I will say about affection, and this came up in one of the series like last year or the year before, but thinking about what affection looks like from each of your kids, I always tell the joke, our middle daughter, you would be in the middle of cooking and all these things going on, and she would come up and just do this awkward lean in, and I'm like, what is that? That was her idea of affection. So you had to put things down. She didn't want the direct hug. She just wanted the touch, so kind of figuring out what that looks like for each kid and meeting them where they are. Even though I am a hugger, she is not, but she still needed that affection just in a different way. The other thing I think with that encouragement piece is kind of cheating, but I think it really helps. When you're in the middle of something like that, given the instructions, tie the shoe or whatever example you want, step away. I'm going to come back and check on you, because me walking away helped me not do it for them. And I will say, the clinical psychology part for me is there's an emotional piece to that and the actual skill. So when I walk away, even though they're frustrated, they're left to figure out the managing of their own emotions and then hopefully problem solve or do that thing. So walking away and saying it to them, I'm going to come back and check on you in a little bit, and walk away and get out of there, because it's too easy when we're right there. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, today is a big one. Today we are going to talk about building morals and values into the lives of our kids. And I want you guys to think for a minute before we talk. And I'm going to kind of pose a question up here. Think for you, what does it currently look like for you and your spouse to, and I really want to emphasize, build morals and values into the lives of your kids? And if you would, think about Proverbs 22:6. Anybody know, kind of recite that for me, not word for word, but it's in your bulletin. What is Proverbs 22:6? What does it say?
I don't have bulletins, but isn't that the like train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they shall not depart from it?
Perfect. That's what I want you guys to keep in mind, because the goal, when we're talking about building morals and values into the lives of our kids, it's not a why I am watching you, you do this. It's not a why you're in our family, you do this. This is that long-term goal so that when they leave us, maybe it's just for a few hours with friends, maybe it's eventually into adulthood, that they have this moral and value compass in there. So when you think about Proverbs 22:6, I want to chat about 3 questions. 1, what are your, if you stop and reflect on it, what are your family's morals and values? What would you say? Honesty? What else?
Integrity.
Integrity. And I love teaching high school kids this, doing what's right even when no one's watching.
Faith.
Faith.
Serving others.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the fruits of the Spirit.
Next question, keep those in mind. What if I had your kids over here in a corner and I asked each of them that same question? How would they answer? Do you think they know those are your morals and values? Anybody willing to say what they might know, what they might not know? Think they do okay? Like Michelle's shaking her head, thinking, I think so.
I think they'd have an idea, but they wouldn't know that that was like on a wall. He said, these are our morals and values. They'd probably be able to fumble through and say, this is what we do, but not necessarily that they are like this foundational morals and values of our family.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think my kids could spontaneously spit them out, but I think if you said, these are our morals, they would agree that, oh yeah, mom and dad tell us that.
Yeah.
We learn that all the time and stuff.
And with a kid, I would ask it, what do you think is important that your parents are trying to instill in you? You know, like what is, and feel like they could. Last question then, think for a second, how are you actively teaching those morals and values to your kids? So the good news, most of you are like, yeah, I think they kind of know. Stop for a second and think about how are you actively doing that? Because I think it's important to reflect, yeah, the end result, I'm getting there, but how are you doing that? What are you guys doing to actively teach your morals and values to your kids?
Asking for forgiveness when, we do wrong.
Mm-hmm. Modeling that behavior, mm-hmm. Especially when you think about serving others and honesty, faith. Yeah.
I think on the faith end, especially when they were little, it gets more complicated, but like answering the unbelievably ridiculous questions at unbelievably ridiculous times of morning.
Yes. Yes. We're going to have a kind of funny example in the video today, but yes, Michelle, agree. Okay, I want you guys to think about this. We are going to watch a video in a second, but I just want to give you a little precursor to it. He is going to talk about, his statement is, we really need to become students of the culture. And he's going to emphasize how we really need to read, learn, ask questions, be in it with our kids, because the one thing we know, we will never get ahead of these things. You have to have that door open and be in it with them. This is where I always, when I do parenting things, I talk about there's a real difference between monitoring your kid and mentoring your kid. And I really want to strongly encourage you to mentor. Mentoring is in a way, and you think about mentor relationships anywhere else in your life, you are constantly kind of coming and going and watching and mentoring, doing what you want them to do, keeping those doors open for questions and maybe some feedback there. But mentoring is our role. And I want to really have you guys think about, one, quantity and quality are both important when you're parenting. So lots of small moments are probably just as important as any big moment you're going to have. We're going to go into some tough topics today. So it's not that one time sit them down and talk about it. It's where do I build these 5-10 minute conversations, and I'll give you guys some advice along the way. It's about, as a parent, really creating, you making these moments where you can ask questions, listen is going to be very important, and also share in that. Right now, think for yourself, the ages of your kids, are you guys doing anything that creates these times in your day where you are intentionally asking questions, talking, opening the door for communication? I'll give you guys an example. We had a couple go-tos. I had a random jar that at first they were my questions, and then eventually the kids started adding those questions, and it might be something as small as what is your favorite color? It got to deeper questions that really helped them talk through morals and values. And then the other thing we did was we each spent time alone with our kids at night. It might be 5 minutes, sometimes maybe 15, 20. If there was something on their mind, because the lights were out, because you were laying in bed and not looking at each other, it created this environment where they could ask or share things that were troubling them. And if there wasn't, especially with my son more than my daughters, we had that jar to kind of go through. Hey, let's just pick a question. And then that question often led to some of these conversations where you could use examples to bring in your morals and values and help kind of guide them. Anybody doing anything at home that is kind of intentionally opening these doors for communication, question sharing?
Go through like a Bible study thing, so
Yes.
our Bible study fellowship, so they go through these questions that seem sort of like, I don't know, like they're pulling from you, but it does lead to a lot of good discussion.
And one of the best things, there's so many good prompts out there with devotions, with Bible verses, things like that. One of the best things you can do, and is sometimes hard, is bite your tongue. Be okay with the silence, because I know for myself what I might be doing in here to get to that answer or think through that. And then at most, if they're not saying anything, ask maybe an open-ended question to get them to kind of talk through that. But yeah, anybody else? Yeah.
A lot of the nighttime, just like laying in bed there, and they want to talk because they want to stay up longer.
Correct.
So, right?
That's it. I was saying that's the best part.
So
Yeah.
just keep
Yeah.
going. A lot of car rides, so like be it to practice or here and there, and then sometimes it's just like maybe one of us has been around, but the other one gets home from work, and it's like we intentionally, a lot of times we'll turn off the media, just like, hey, want to hear about your day, talk, and so they're actually focusing in, not like talking to us while they're playing the video game or something.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Good. Yeah.
We actually had the pediatrician, because we have one child that can dominate the conversation. So when I mentioned it to the pediatrician, he said, and this is something that we feel like has worked in our, at time at the dinner table, can you tell me 2 things you liked about your day and 2 things you didn't? Because then the one who doesn't normally talk is talking too, and we get to hear about all 4 of us get to talk.
We always had 4 questions: your high, your low, who you helped, and who helped you. Because a big focus for me was the service piece. So think of your own 2 to 4 questions, but you each go around. Even when they had friends over, they learned to do it. Later dating relationships, they learned to do it. But it gives each person a time to talk. And it says, you are important, you're part of this family, and we care, So think of a couple questions is a great way to do it. Good. We are going to watch the video. This time, we're just going to watch the whole video, and it's about 15 minutes, and then we'll talk about 3 different pieces here. Oops, sorry.
So first of all, we've got to become students of their culture. Our culture is influencing our kids big time, and we need to understand how culture is affecting the way our kids act. Maybe with music, sexuality, drug and alcohol use, abuse. To become a student of the culture means that you now know that vaping is causing nicotine use to be on the rise, and that media influences are actually one of the primary influences in our kids' lives. I'm not saying that we should just complain and whine about it. What we do need to do is know who's influencing. Who are the media people who are influencing my kids' lives? We should know that, see? So we've got to be a student of the culture. And you can't keep up with all of it. So you can learn from your own kids. That's where I learned. I'd say, hey, what's the latest music group? What's going on here? What do you think about this movie? Read blogs. Okay, Homeward has a culture blog. We do at our ministry that was actually voted one of the top culture blogs in the world. We're talking CNN, the BBC, China Culture Update, and then our culture blog. And what it does is every Friday it comes out. It takes you about 5 minutes to read, and it keeps you updated. So find the blogs, find the podcasts, find whatever it takes for you to become, more involved in the culture so you can be an expert on knowing what the culture is. Teach them healthy sexuality. Now, we talk about this in a lot of the courses, but all studies show that the more positive, value-centered sex education kids receive from home, well, the less promiscuous and confused they'll be. So when we're talking about morals and values, the same here goes for drug and alcohol use and abuse, for how you handle media in the home. But let's go back to the issue of sexuality. Well, we've got to teach them what we call age-appropriate developmental sex education. So you start when your kids are 3 to 5. And I think you tell them that God made their body. Okay, God made boys and God made girls, and your body is special, and it was all God's idea. And again, you're not getting into the gory details of a sex ed conversation, but hey, you're beginning. 6 to 9 years old is another one. How does God make babies? Now, you don't go through all the details again, but you're beginning to help them understand what's God's plan for a family. And they begin to understand a little bit more about that. I was thinking about a story about a little boy who was 7 years old, and he came home from school and he said, "Mommy, what is sex?" The mom freaks out because she was told that it would happen a little bit later, that you're supposed to have this conversation. And now she also had heard from somebody like me that you're supposed to answer their questions. So she sat him down at the table with a plate of cookies and a big glass of milk. And for 45 minutes, she described in detail what sex was to the 7-year-old. 7-year-old's eyes were as big as saucers. He ate the entire plate of cookies and he drank all the milk. Finally, at the end, she takes a deep breath and says, "Honey, do you have any more questions?" He says, "Well, just one." And he pulls a piece of paper out of his pocket and it says soccer application, sex, M or F. He goes, "I still don't know what I'm supposed to write here." So in other words, all he was asking was a simple question. She went into all the details when in fact, if she would have said, "Honey, why do you ask me that question?" he could have pulled out the paper and it would have been easier. Now, I'm sure that her husband was like in shock when he came home. But the point that I'm saying here is that it has to be age appropriate. She shouldn't have probably gone into all the other details. But by the time they're 10, and I mean 10, that's when we begin to teach them the purity code. 10 to 14, key time for them. The purity code, talking about puberty, basically talking about relationships, dealing with pornography, so many other things. And by the time they're 14, you pretty much talk about everything. Okay. So let me introduce you to the purity code just real quickly. And again, like I said, there's other courses on this, but the purity code goes like this. In honor of God, my family, and my future spouse, I commit my life to sexual purity or sexual integrity, either way. And it's going to involve 4 things that all come out of the scripture. You honor God with your body. You renew your mind for good. You turn your eyes from worthless things, that's in the Psalms, and you guard your heart. In fact, the Bible says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. What are other things that you bring up? Well, this year, this season, this decade maybe, it's the decade of pornography. And it has escalated like crazy, and it's influencing our kids. And so we've got to teach our kids that if they view pornography, and by the way, it's not so much if, it's when. Right now, the average age is 11. That if you view pornography, your mind takes a picture of it, okay? And you'll never lose that. And then you get into addiction, which basically means you want more. Then you get escalating, so it escalates, and you want to see more and more. And then you get desensitized. So it was gross a year ago or 2 months ago or 2 weeks ago isn't gross anymore. And so you've gotten desensitized to what you've been viewing. And then step 5 is you act it out. You act it out sexually, first in your mind and then in person. That's what we're seeing happen with kids today. But it's also because parents didn't take a step back and have a strategy for teaching morals and values. Now, there's some other important aspects of morals and values. And one is the issue of drugs and alcohol, and again, we could spend so much more time on this, but let me just say it this way. A couple of things. As a parent, know what gateway drugs are. Back in the day, your kids would have learned this in school, but today they don't have as much education on this, but gateway drugs start with beer and wine, okay? And frankly, the first age of drink for boys is 11, and for girls it's 13. So they will drink a beer, they will have a sip of wine, and about 85% of Christian kids will try alcohol, okay? But it's the gateway. So why is the gateway? And that's where it starts, and it starts really quite young. Usually where they'll get their first drink is from the parents' liquor cabinet, not from 7-Eleven or, Circle K. Pretty quickly, if they've been open to drinking, they'll move to the next part of the gateway, which is nicotine, okay? And that would be, of course, cigarettes and now vaping. A couple of things on nicotine. Let me just say it this way. It's one of the strongest addictions known to humankind, okay? And actually what they're now learning is that when you put nicotine into your system, it even affects you like an antidepressant might. So you have neurotransmitters in your brain, and under stress it separates, but then if they smoke a cigarette or if they vape, it'll actually put those back together, okay? If kids smoke, then one of the reasons why I'm concerned about it is obviously heart disease, lung cancer, things like that. But if kids smoke, there is an 81% chance that they will move on to marijuana. 81% chance that they'll at least try marijuana. If they don't smoke, there's only about a 20% chance. So again, the third level gets stronger. It's harder alcohol and it's marijuana. So let's talk about harder alcohol for a minute, okay? So harder alcohol means, something beyond beer, something with a little higher alcohol content, although beer can have a high alcohol content as well. So if kids drink, they need to understand a couple of things. One is there is a biological predisposition toward alcoholism. So I come from a family with alcoholism. Dad was alcoholic, 2 brothers, grandpa on my mom's side, so I've got it all over the place. So I have a much greater chance of becoming an alcoholic just because it's the biological predisposition thing going. So we had to teach our kids, you have a biological predisposition. Now, the other thing we wanted to teach our kids, and you want to teach your kids, is that people who struggle with alcoholism or any kind of an addiction typically have a high tolerance. So what that means is that I might be able to drink 5 beers and not be drunk at all, and you drink 2 beers and you're sloshy drunk. Well, guess what? I have a higher tolerance to alcohol, but I'm also a budding alcoholic then. So we want to teach our kids that. That's what we did. We sat down our kids at about 13 and said, biological predisposition, higher tolerance, okay? They needed to learn that stuff. And then the other thing is marijuana, which is now legal in California, in state of Washington, Colorado, other places, but it will be legal everywhere. So again, I realize people use marijuana for medical purposes and whatnot. I'm a little worried about marijuana for a number of reasons. First of all, the marijuana that President Bill Clinton did not inhale in the 1970s, it's not the same marijuana. Today it's 5 to 20% stronger, and oftentimes it's laced with something else. So the marijuana that people are smoking, even if they're buying it in a store legally in certain states, it's a pretty strong drug, see? And if they're buying it illegally, then it oftentimes could be laced with something else, and it's gonna be a lot stronger. So it's more potent. It does other things, and of course it gets you high like anything else, okay? But what people forget is that marijuana can produce what we call amotivational syndrome. Everybody talks about this, and actually even people who are pro-marijuana have to admit that you can get amotivational syndrome, which means basically, summary, your brain becomes lazy and lethargic. So now we have to be teaching our kids that marijuana can be somewhat dangerous because they're going to be in a world that's going to say it's cool and great, see? So if kids smoke marijuana, if they do harder alcohol, guess what happens? They're going to be more prone to, and more open to using harder drugs. What are harder drugs? Meth, heroin, cocaine, even prescription drugs. See, what they call it is farming, P-H-A-R-M-I-N-G. And so some kids will come to a party and there'll be a yellow pill and a red pill and a green pill and a white pill, and they mix them, and that's pretty scary. So very few people ever go straight to the harder drugs, but they go through the gateway. And so as parents, you want to teach your kids what the gateway is and be aware of it if your kids are on their way through the gateway. Now let's ask another question. Why do kids use drugs and alcohol? Now, by the way, alcohol is a drug, okay? It's mood and mind altering. It is a drug, period, okay? It's also a food. It's not much of a food, but it has calories, so you got to call it a food. But it's also toxic, okay? Just alcohol. So alcohol and drugs, put them together. So why do they do that? You know, there was a season in my life where I spoke to a lot of kids, like Red Ribbon Weeks, and we would talk about, I used to try to scare them, and then I realized that never works, because they're always going to say, it won't happen to me. Then I started teaching them these two facts, and I got their attention. Number one, why do you take drugs? Why do you continue to use them? Well, it makes you feel good. I mean, you could have a boyfriend or a girlfriend break up with you, your parents could yell at you, and if you put a drug into your system, it's going to make you feel good. And number two, it works every single time. Sure, there's stories of people overdosing, but most of the time it doesn't. So people who start with this, and as parents, you've got to understand this, hey, it works, and it makes them feel good. So with that in mind, that's the powerful force of continuing to use drugs and alcohol. But we also need to make sure that we understand, how do kids start using? Because again, this is a phase, and even if you have little kids, you've got to know this. Well, it starts with what we call the experimental use phase, okay, which basically means that most kids are going to experiment. They're going to use it. They may not even like the taste. They may not inhale the nicotine, whatever, but there's an experimental use phase, which pretty rapidly moves to what we call the social use phase. So the social use phase is where they're comfortable with the beer in the hand. They may only have one beer for the whole party, but they're comfortable with it. And they've changed their friend group to be in a place where the rest of the friend group feels comfortable too. So that's called social use phase. Some people never get past social use phase. Then there's what we call the dependency stage, or the dependency phase. Now, this doesn't mean that they're addicts yet, but yet they're dependent on alcohol. For example, I have some family members who, at every function that is a celebration, there is always going to be alcohol, because they equate the party with alcohol, or the celebration with alcohol, see? And, you know, there's some alcohol drinking in between that too, but kids will do the same thing. They'll equate after the football game, or if they're teens, or at special times with that, and they're actually at that dependency stage. And then you get to the addiction phase, okay? That's where your body is craving it differently, and it's just now they need it. Their bodies need it. You know what the number one addiction is in America? Alcohol. Then it goes right in this order: heroin, cocaine, nicotine, painkillers, methadone, amphetamine. Amphetamine can also be meth. And those are the addictions. And again, addictions are tough. Still talking about morals and values, but I just want to bring it up. And again, we have an entire course on it called Creating a Media Safe Home. But how do we create a media safe home? Well, first of all, if you're going to create a media safe home, you've got to know what your kids are listening to. So listen to what they listen to, watch what they watch, and read what they read. And if you've got younger kids, do all the same for kids who are a little bit older, because they're going to be influencing them big time. The other thing I would say, and again, we can talk for hours on this, but make sure you understand what's going on with your kids online. So much has moved online today. So what can you teach your kids, even from a young age? Well, no personal information without permission. So kids give out way too much personal information. I'm not saying everybody on the internet is some kind of a horrible person. I'm just saying there's too much information out there. Okay. Also, the computer, and again, some of you will disagree with me on this, and your kids definitely will, but the computer, I think, should be in a pretty highly visible place, especially when the kids are younger. The reason I think that is because you put a 15-year-old boy in his bedroom saying he's doing homework for 5 hours. He may not be looking at pornography, he may be, but you know, he's gaming, he's talking with his friends, he's doing something else. So our feeling is that you bring the computer into a visible place most of the time. There's a great joy of having Wi-Fi and a great negativity, and that's one of them. Also, the computer and the TV are not babysitters. So if you get in the habit, even with little kids, to just make it the babysitter, I mean, periodically it's not a bad thing. But if you do that all the time, then it's going to stimulate parts of their brain that is going to really be addictive to them in a big, big way. Media is very addictive to our brain. We forget about that. So the web is just a resource, it's not a toy. And I think you do, and I said this just a little earlier, is I think you have to have the parent-child privacy talk. Way too many kids don't understand that. They want to have everybody as their friends, and they want to share their entire life out there. And I'm not sure that the internet is the place to do that, okay? And then also remember, and help your kids understand this, that pornography rules the web. It just does. There's an underbelly of the web that produces a vast amount of pornography, and that's not a good thing for kids, period. Be aware of that. And then also, I believe with kids is consider a quality web filter. Today, there's some really good web filters out there, and you'll ask, so let me just give you my 3 favorite. Covenant Eyes, costs a little bit of money, not much, but Covenant Eyes, it has really a good web filter at different ages. XXXchurch.com is using a really good web filter right now. It's Christian, but it gets the web filter from different ages again. And then Be Safe Online, I like those. There's plenty of others that you can do. It used to be only for computers, but now there's good web filters for phones too, because the phone is the greatest distributor of internet pornography and the greatest privacy part.
All right. So I'm going to move us along here a little bit with time here. So let's start with sexuality, because who doesn't want to talk about this as a parent? What were your takeaways with what he talked about with sexuality? Anything stick out for you guys? I really liked this statement, the reminder. The more positive, value-centered sex education they receive from home, the less promiscuous and confused they will be. They are curious. They are born to be curious. And I cannot emphasize enough as a parent, if you don't share, talk, answer, somebody else will, and it's probably not the person you want to. And I get goosebumps with this statement, so hear me out, but it is not comfortable. But yet I challenge us, it's not about me right now. It's about my kid, and the curiosity part behind this is absolutely normal in how they were created. So I like the reminder, the more positive, value-centered sex education we provide to them, the better off they're going to be. The goal, obviously, because you're not going to get totally ahead of it, but is being proactive as much as you can and keep talking. The story about the little boy asking about sex, and he really just meant, male or female, and she went into all the details. The 2 lines I've always given parents that we used all the time, have permission, give yourself permission to buy some time. Because your kid is always inevitably going to ask this at the worst timing, not when you're prepared to have these conversations. And it's going to be, I always say, they give you a little teaser. They're going to ask something that jars you, and how you respond is going to be very, very important as to whether they keep that conversation with you or not. So the 2 things, because we had this time at night, whenever they asked me something that I wasn't sure how I wanted to answer, I would always say, you know what, tonight, Ellie, when we have that time, let's revisit this conversation. Right now, we got to cook dinner or whatever, but this is a really important conversation. I love your question. Let's talk about it tonight. Now I've got some time to think through that. Even better, that is a very important question, and I know your dad would want to be on this conversation too, so let's find some time to talk. So whether it's a timing thing or a spouse thing, but have that in your back pocket as you're raising these young ones, because again, how you initially respond to them is going to be, the first 2 seconds is going to be the most important piece of whether they feel like they can come to you with these questions or comments or stories or not. What he talked about was kind of that age-appropriate conversations. This is difficult, and I do think there's some resources out there for parents, but this is difficult to know how detailed do I get. He definitely gave guidance here on kind of 3 to 5 is about how God made your body and staying focused there. 6 to 9 was how God made babies, so minimizing kind of the details there. But really pretty much from 10 on is very detailed. He also talked about that purity code pledge. In there, I appreciated he talked just the pledge is in honor of God, my family, and my future spouse. I commit to my life to sexual purity or integrity. And he talked about there's 4 different components. Honor God with my body. And this is that good reminder of God made me, and bringing that into your conversations. Renew my mind for good. Turn your eyes from worthless things, and then guard your heart above all else. Does anybody in their homes have any of these conversations? Can you share with us kind of the magic of what this looks like? Anybody? Michelle? Yeah.
No, go ahead.
This isn't a conversation, but I know last year, so Derek was in 5th grade, and some of the parents were talking about a book, and they got the book for the kids to let them read it and see what the questions, and I don't know if it's Christian based. Do you remember what it was called? But no, okay, we have it. And then I wanted to read it before I gave it to him. So like, do you think you start reading it? And then I was like, oh, I want to read what's in here first, and I haven't given it back yet, so I probably should.
A book is a nice thing, though,
Yeah,
that,
it
again,
was-
kind of like devotions or Bible verse, gets a kid thinking
Yeah.
to then be able to ask the questions. Or Michelle, did you have something there?
It was a little wild.
There's not a right or wrong.
Wild. We had a little bit of talking, and then they had like the puberty talk at school, and they came home, and all I remember is Micah slamming through the door, and he says, "School is way inappropriate." And I said, "All right, what did you talk about today?" And and then it went from there. It was a good stepping stone to talk about, like, this is how God made your body, and this is how things work, and it's not inappropriate, it's beautiful, and da 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 da. But even now, like, if we approach the topic, it's like, that's gross, Mom, we're not talking about this.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of surprised when he said like age 11 for a lot of this stuff. I'm like, you're talking to my children who are still beating up each other and beating up their friends of the other sex. Like, I was watching them yesterday, like, wrestle
Right.
in like a completely like
Appropriate, yeah, it's like
appropriate
fun.
thing.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I mean, maybe my kids are, I mean, I don't want to like write that off, but I'm like, maybe my kids are just strange, and I don't know.
I think, though, it does depend on the personality of your kid. You know them best. And one of the best things you can do, Michelle, is I'm just keeping that door open. I love hearing stories or books or whatever, and you just kind of plant that seed when you're driving in the car, when you're laying there at night with them, and you just kind of keep putting it there so they know they can come to you. The fact that Micah came home and said it's so inappropriate tells me he can come to you. That's 90% of this. Were you going to say something? Okay.
Well, leaving the door open, which you just said, but then also being receptive to when they have those little subtle, like Micah mumbles a lot, and I hear it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very annoying.
Yes.
But like hearing that when he might want to talk,
Might be a little way
and knowing it's
in
not going to
and-
be convenient for me
Mhm.
to
No.
talk about it. But
No, never.
So that's what I took from it, is
Yes.
he's ready.
Then he went into pornography, and just for the sake of time, just some reminders here. Statistics, do you remember average age? He said they're being exposed to pornography? 11. And and we'll get into this media part here in just a second, which I think will help guide us. This is another one, though. My advice to you, no judgment, and it's really, really hard. The best advice I was ever given as a parent is no matter what your kid comes to you with, pretend it is your kid's best friend. So think of that best friend's name, and I want that planted in your head. So instead of your child coming to you, it's your child's best friend. Our reactions to our kids' friends are very different. We do somewhat stay a little more patient and talk through it versus our kid, we're like, what? So just keep that planted in your head. It ultimately comes from curiosity. And again, if we aren't patient enough to answer these questions and talk through it with them, they're going to find that information out somewhere else. Open communication, no tech in the bedroom, which we're going to lead into, so I won't spend a lot of time here. I think the big thing I want you to remember with no tech in the bedroom is ultimately, a long time ago, I think research started to say you need to monitor what your kid is on. And I'm going to tweak that for you. It is not as much about monitoring what they are on and what that site is or what that information is it is about monitoring your kid. Monitoring your kid to the sense of what are they reacting to? Are they getting upset? So that not having it in the bedroom and having it in that public place is so I am constantly walking by and setting quick eyes on you. Plus, I always say they have to come up for air then versus shut in a room. That curiosity is there. If we don't answer those questions, they will find it. All right, how about drugs and alcohol? Oh, yeah. Yes.
Something to that too, like with the no tech in the bedroom, it's something we as adults, I think, should also lead by example, because
Going to
if
say
we're
that,
doing it,
yes.
they're like, well, why can't we do it? Yeah.
Yes. And we're going to talk about that. I don't have enough time for my topics on devices, but I just want to spend a second on that. Research is coming out. We know with the kids, and I'll talk why it's not in the bedroom, but what they're finding is in spouse relationships, when you have it in the bedroom, it is standing in the way of that connection with your spouse. Your bedrooms, if I gave you any advice at all, no technology in the bedrooms whatsoever. That is where we connect with other people. So I agree. And sometimes I'm okay as a parent to say, rules are different for me because I'm an adult, because of whatever. But that one, I hope your kid comes back with the research to say, not good for you either, Dad, because it's out there. Good. Drugs and alcohol. And you guys interrupt me, raise your hand. What do you guys remember? First, he kind of talked through gateway drugs, probably nothing new for you guys. I think we know most of that. But I do think two things. One, with the beer and wine where he started, do you remember the average age where a boy started to use and then a girl? 11 and 13. And then do you remember where they say they are most often to get that first drink?
They're home.
Their homes, right? So we have it in our head that some adult is buying for them, or there's that convenience store that's serving them. It's in our homes. Just encouraging you to be conscious of what it looks like in your home and how accessible it is. He talked about kind of the beer, starting with the beer and wine, going on to nicotine and vaping, and he gave a very interesting statistic with the nicotine and vaping. What did he say about the likelihood of someone trying marijuana in regards to whether they smoked? Does anybody remember those statistics? 80% more likely to try marijuana if they're a smoker. And what was the percent if they never smoked? 20. I mean, that's a huge statistic there. So the more normalized that vaping is, why would I not just turn to marijuana? And two things really concerning with marijuana, and again, I could go on and on about this, is one, the potency of today versus my dad when he was in Vietnam and that kind of thing. So one, potency, but two, vaping and how it's going into the bloodstream. It is very different than the marijuana that our parents or when we were younger kind of had around. Two, it's one of the strongest addictions. Do you remember what he said the number one addiction is, though? Alcohol. Probably not surprising. He did talk through that it's important to talk about kind of genetics and knowing yours. I think this is a responsible way for you to say, I just need you to know alcoholism runs in our family. Here are our family members. And I like how he put it in the perspective of tolerance. So you and your buddy are both drinking and you have 5 to his 1. That's not a good thing. And that's that tolerance piece tied to the genetics. So I do think it's important to talk to your kids about just your family genetics. Then he talked about why kids use, and I do like that he brought up how he shifted what those presentations were like, because we would all love to say it is bad and stay away from it, but if we've learned anything from our ads over the years, I think this is a powerful thing to say to our kids. It does work. It does make you feel good. Now let's talk about, next step. But that's a great place to start because that is why kids use. And if they do use, they know every time it's feeling good. And then there might be some consequences, but then I forget about those, and then I want that feeling of good. And so I do like that he highlighted that. Anything else with drug and alcohol before I give you guys a little bit of advice here? Anything that stuck out, Michelle? No,
This is my health practitioner soapbox. But kids use, and this has been my experience and statistically, kids who have mental health disorders are more likely to use. So if you have a kid with anxiety, if you have a kid with depression, if you have anxiety and depression in your family and it's genetics, you gotta stay on top of it. Don't say, oh, they'll grow it, oh, it's just age, da da da. They will, if you don't help them, they're gonna find it. They're gonna self-medicate.
They feel better.
So if anything, I would say the mental health aspect you can't ignore it when you talk about drugs and alcohol. You have kids with ADHD are more at risk, any kids with any type of, health disorders are more at risk. You just gotta know that your kid, can stay on top of it, however you have to.
One of the things, I love the conversations with teenage brains who they say, no, I don't want medication. I don't want to put medication in my body. And yet they're using, and we have the
prescription medication that we know the known side effects and we know it works, then let them drink.
Correct.
Please.
Correct.
If I can tell you nothing else today, please.
And Michelle, I love that point. The reason they're using is, gosh, I feel a lot better on this than the way my brain is working over here without it. Yes. Yeah.
Too, like he used the example, like kids will think, oh, it won't happen to me. But I think us as parents too, it's hard to not be like, oh, that won't happen to my kid, or my kid wouldn't do that.
Oh my gosh.
In reality,
They can't just try it this once and then, yes. And that's what I want to lead into this next piece of advice. I'm going to make this quick so that we can get to the media. But one of the lines I teach parents is do not blur the lines. As I go through this, I want you to know I have no judgment. You are parents of your kids and you're going to make decisions. But I want you to think about this. When it comes to especially alcohol, we know that's the number one addiction. I think parents, especially when your kids get to high school, can kind of blur the lines. So I'm going to pretend you're my kid, and you know what? We're in my house. So here, I want you to learn how to drink responsibly, so I'm going to let you drink here. And then what happens is the next time you have your best friend over, and I'm like, you know what? You guys are here. I'm going to take your keys. I want you to know how to do this responsibly, so sure, you guys can drink together. Now what happens is my son goes to his best friend's house, and he's like, you know what? She was okay with it when you were here with my house, so yeah, they'd be okay with it. Now we add another one. Well, we're still together, and we've really blurred this lines. And I want you to remember, brain of a teenager is run by the limbic system, emotions and impulse. Prefrontal cortex is not there. And one of the best lines you can know as a parent, you are the prefrontal cortex until it shows up. And do you know what age it shows up? Mid-20s. You are their prefrontal cortex. So with alcohol, and this happens all the time in high school, it's like, I'm going to let them do this responsibly. I want to challenge you on that. Do you do that with sex? Probably not. To teach responsibility, here's the two things. Yes, I want my kid, if they choose to drink, to do it responsibly. But there's two things that happen. One, if we don't blur those lines, as parents, there are so many things we have to decide what's right for our kid. Oh my gosh, all day, every day. For once, if there is a policy, a rule, a law about it, my God, that's one that you don't have to get involved with. Nope, there's already that law made. Second of all, is for your kid's sake, allow for more brain development. The longer you put that off, brain development's going to get there, but meanwhile, back to the title of this presentation, you guys have time to build in those morals and values in order for them to make the right decision for them. So don't blur the lines. The law's on your side. Buy yourself time for those two reasons. Okay, we've got 8 minutes to get through media, which is not enough time for Missy Berg. So, media use, again, this is the best advice you can have. Mentor, 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 mentor. And I love the comment about what are we doing with our technology, because right now, if any of you guys want books or articles on this, I have aplenty. But what they're finding is that continuous partial attention of the adults with their kids is probably one of the most detrimental parenting styles we have gotten ourselves into. So what you do with your device, it used to be kids we were talking about, the adults are in that as well. I did like that he talked about the listen to what they're listening to, watch what they're watching, read what they're reading. I really like that. One piece of advice I give parents is every Sunday, you pick your day, I don't care what it is, but for me it was Sunday, where if your kids have any kind of device, an iPad, a cell phone, anything like that, together as a family, you're going to sit down with that kid, not with the other siblings, and do a quick check. Hey, let's just see, how many hours were you on it? What were you on this week? Where did you spend your time? And then I strongly encourage you as an adult to also share. Whoa, mom or dad got up to, anybody know the average daily use of a teenager, 13 to 17 right now, from commonsensemedia.org?
9 hours.
7 to 9 hours. And I just want you to grasp that. But adults are creeping up there. So be honest with them. Whoa, I just noticed I was on it for 4 hours. Mom's got to take a check there too. But weekly check-ins, you're sitting next to them. There's no judgment and lecture here. Hey, let's just reflect. What would be a goal for next week? Second thing is anytime you have a friend's kid story or a news story or anything where you can talk about, wow, did you hear about this that happened? Now you've got a story to build in those morals and values. What do you think about this? Does this have any concerns with it? But bring other people's stories in so that you keep talking about it. 3, again, check yourself because they are watching. They're watching more closely than you guys think. I think here it is really important to share your own mistakes, maybe when you sent something out on social media or you responded to something and then the negative consequences that came out there, but share with them those stories. He talked through the tips for guiding your kids online, and I did put those in the bulletin. No personal information without permission, the highly visible place, not being babysitters, the web as a resource, the parent-child privacy talk, pornography, and then that web filter. Before I get into this next section, anybody have some good strategies you are using right now to control that media? I will say I read way too much, but 12 years ago now, Jean Twing wrote this book, which I took a lot from, but she has, if you have a late elementary, junior high, high school, and you are contemplating when is the right time to give a cell phone, what kind of cell phone, I will say very easy read, and she's got very practical advice in here. What I like about this book is she also has the if somebody says this, here's your, for lack of better words, your counter, kind of why you are doing what you're doing, especially because our teenagers are going to ask these questions. So very user-friendly parent book.
Can you say the name of the book and the author again?
Yes, so it's 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World, and it's by Jean Twain, who wrote the original iGen book. But I just like this one, easy, usable for parents. Some of them get very, into the research and all of that, but this is a very easy read. Okay, I want to end with these no-tech zones that I do believe every kid deserves. They need it, but I think they deserve it. And if you keep in your head, the focus is I am that prefrontal cortex until it shows up. So the first one is academic settings. And this is both homework time and schools. Still never going to win that battle with schools. But with the academic settings, there's 3 reasons why you do not want devices anywhere near your kid when they're doing schoolwork-related things. One, again, the prefrontal cortex, where the executive functioning takes place. Keep in mind, it's like a muscle. It has to develop. So what research is showing is this increased tech time is actually standing in the way and thinning that prefrontal cortex in the way that now they aren't able to focus as much. They aren't able to organize in some of these skills. It's like a muscle. We've got to build it. So they remove the tech so that they build it. The second thing, I always say, kids are anti-fragile. Humans are anti-fragile. We actually need stressors and curveballs in order to grow and adapt. Removing that technology means they will struggle in that homework. AP stats, my kids struggled left and right. Let them struggle versus going right to the answer. We're teaching them to come up with the answer versus really learning that material. And then the third one is just in that brain development. A lot of good research out there about the white matter in the brain and the gray matter in the brain and what devices are doing. The second one, which I would say is my most important, is out of that bedroom and adults and kids. 3 things with the bedroom. One, keep in mind, we want to build connection with our kids. This is the high-tech generation that is the most lonely than any generation before them. So out of the bedroom gives me the chance, even if you're on your device, I get to walk by and say, hey, how you doing? That touch, that's the oxytocin, right? Connection is constantly kind of being around your kid. When they go into their room, you have no idea what they're on for how long. And this is kind of where I say they come up for air every time I walk by them and engage in a little chit-chat. The second thing is coping strategies, which is probably my biggest passion. Without that device, now they learn to manage their emotions, problem solve, and even rely on other people. I always say build multiple circles of support. As long as they can rely on their device, we know research is telling us they're distracting themselves, scrolling. They are what I call kind of looking for that false assurance, throwing it to my BFF or my mommy, and then they respond, and that response feels good for about 5 seconds, and then it's gone, or those social comparisons. And the last one, not in the bedroom, what is the number one most important thing your kid can get at these ages? Sleep. Average kid is about 6 hours, a teenager is 6 to 7 hours of sleep when they need 8 to 10. Get it out of the bedroom. One thing we learned in COVID is when we mix focus and engagement with your bedroom, I don't know what to do. Am I supposed to relax? Am I supposed to be on? Get everything out of the bedroom so that when they walk across the threshold of that bedroom, they know their body needs to relax, and you too as adults. Number 3, junctions. Natural times in your day where you are going to run into your kid, right? So this is dinner. This is the car rides. This is waiting for appointments, waiting for practices to start. You and your kid put devices away. This is 5 to 10 minutes where you can practice communication and all those nonverbal pieces of communication they're losing out on. Connection. This is where I have some questions to ask, and then building that character. 5, 10-minute little stories to get you guys viewing those morals and values. Last one, front seat of the car, and I love that you mentioned this one earlier. Front seat of the car, your kid is going to be 16 before you know it, and you won't be driving them around. Front seat of the car, the best part is that communication. I'm driving, so I'm not making that eye contact, which is a heck of a lot more comfortable for my kid, but now it might be where they give you those little tidbits to see how you respond, to know should I keep talking or not. Yes, let them keep talking. Keep your eyes on the road. Second is with that connection, this might be where your kids bring up some of those tougher conversations. Last just a moment for them. Silence and getting them to sit in silence and not have this dopamine hit constantly is the best thing for your kid. Stare out the window. Turn off the radio. Just let them sit and decompress. All right, of course I have to end on homework, and I know I'm out of time. I want you to commit to one change. Be intentional of one thing you guys are going to do this week that either addresses maybe the sexuality, maybe drugs and alcohol, maybe that media use, but one change. I am okay next week if you come back and you say, Missy, that sucked, didn't work for me, but we got to change something. Give it a week to see what happens with that, but think about a moral or value that's important to you. If I sat your kid down and said, do you know about this one? They're going to say yes, because here's an action step I'm taking. Deal? Okay, I will close this in prayer, so sorry. If you'll close your hands with me. Thank you, God, for giving us this hour and being with us as we talk about the importance of building morals and values into the lives of our kids. Remind us of Proverbs 22:6 so that our training guides our kids into adulthood. And please be with us this week as we implement a change that helps our kids develop strong morals and values. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys.